Hey nerds, and welcome back to Nordic D&D. In this episode, guys, I want to tell you all about Nordic D&D, the Ariana Saga, our Dungeons and Dragons podcast. To give you a taste what I have to bring to the table, what is different between this podcast and so many other Dungeons and Dragons podcasts out there. Let's go, guys. Hello nerds and geeks, and welcome back to the show. Now, as I did reveal not too long ago at our Info E channel, I made an announcement about the release of the Ariana Saga, our Dungeons and Dragons podcast. And it's going to be released in 2021 at January every Friday. So the first Friday of January, you'll get the first Session 0 episode. Now, in this episode of the Nerd Hangout, I want to tell you a little bit about our podcast. I want to tell you what's different about this podcast and so many others out there. And I think ours has a fresh perspective, and it maybe glides a little bit over to an audiobook feeling, but you still get the dice rolls and you still get that Dungeons and Dragons feeling. Now, I have already released a pre-release season. I released it to give you a little taste of what is to be desired, to see if you liked it. But the time has come for us to officially release season 1. And I am going to release the 9 episodes again, one each week. But I have added a lot of differences in the episode. Now, I think the biggest difference you will see maybe is in Session 0, the first episode to be released. In that episode, I'm going to show you how the podcast started. The main difference will be that I am going to include all the players in the official Session 0. You'll hear their backstories right in the front. You'll get to know the heroes and the players, which will give you a little intimate knowledge about the players.
My name is Bastion, and I play the character Kettle, who is a male human druid.
Hello, my name is Martin. In the Ariana Saga, I play Hunter, the tiefling warlock / fighter.
Hello guys, my name is Kjartan Johansen. I am playing Sovan Velfaren. He is a human warlock with a small twist, and this is his backstory. The night is oddly dark this night in 8th Village. Snow and the howling of the wind make it near impossible to wander outside without some kind of magic.
I really like the personal missions of the players, the personal stories, the interaction, the role-playing between the players and their backstories. It's one of my favorite aspects in Dungeons and Dragons. Also when I listen to other podcasts like Critical Role. And when you come from episode 1 to episode 9, there are cutscenes between that were not in the pre-released episodes, because I want to give you a little bit more feeling, and there are minor differences. Now, the podcast is a Dungeons and Dragons 5th edition game. It is a homebrew world made by me in a world called Ariana. I have in every episode a segue in the podcast called Camp Lore. Now, in Camp Lore, you are going to hear discussions between an old man and a young boy discussing all events relevant to Ariana. And that is going to be how I'm going to introduce lore in the podcast. And it's only going to be a few minutes at a time. And I think I should give you a little taste on how camp lore sounds. So here you go, guys.
I see, Grandfather. Are there other creations created by Ignitus then?
Well, yes. After Grimna's scourge on Ariana, Ignitus saw the destruction he had left, and this put a smile on his face. He also noticed the power Grimna had gained from all his new worshippers, and by gaining necromancy. And he knew he would be a much bigger threat on Ariana if it would happen for him. So Ignitus started planning and scheming himself. He made his own plans in his realm. This was to be the biggest creation yet, calling them devils, demons, and the infernos, whose some have been released to Ariana. And you most likely have heard the stories of them, son.
Yeah, yes I have. Scary stories.
Well, most stories come from some form of truth.
I suppose you're right. But what about the tieflings? Are they evil like the demons?
Tieflings are only half demons. No, they are not evil in their nature, more than humans or dwarves or elves are, for that matter. But have the choice to be evil, as we all do. And many of them, sadly, choose to be evil, to honor their demonic nature.
Well, like you say, we all have that choice, I guess.
Indeed, my boy. Indeed. Some breadcrumbs for you to know what happens around my world. Now, some of the major differences I will think about my podcast and all those podcasts out there, I've mentioned some of them before, is that I want you, the listeners, to know more what is going on, more behind the scenes. I want you to know the players from episode 0, from the get-go, and I want you to see all the planning the enemies make as we go. So there are going to be cutscenes in episodes where you hear planning by the enemies and what is going on around the world, events happening which the players know nothing about. As I told the players when we started recording, is that the world is moving, and what you choose to do will affect situations, and if you choose to ignore some problems and do nothing about it, well, then that effect and that problem will evolve. So if you leave something alone, it will have consequences, as well as if you do something, it also will have consequences, and you, the listeners, will hear about what happens and what goes on. But of course I want to do that a smart way, so I don't reveal everything, so there is still room for surprise. If you listen to the podcast, you can listen on Stitcher, on Spotify, on iTunes, and Podbean, where we also have our homepage for the podcast.
Yeah, so to get to our homepage, you just type in nordicdnd.podbean.com, and that will take you right to our homepage. So this is our main screen, as you can see, with Grimna, Nordic D&D, the title, the Dice of Destiny, and then the Ariana Saga name. And as we scroll down, you can see the episodes of the pre-release season already put out there. We have 9 episodes in total of the pre-release season. And here on the sidebar you can see different kinds of things like battlebards.com, or a link. If you push that, it will take you directly to BattleBards and let them know that Nordic D&D sent you. And if you click on this link, it will take you directly to Feslian Studios, where we use a lot of the music from. He has amazing contact. Be sure to check that out as well, guys. And if you want to consider becoming a Patreon of Nordic D&D, you can press this link right here and it will take you directly to our Patreon account, where you can support the channel. And another link we have is the one to James Austin, who is the artist who actually created our logo depicting the god of death, Grimna, which he did an amazing job. You can click on there and it will take you directly to his Instagram account, where you can check out his content, guys. Be sure to do that. So yeah, of course, all our episodes will be released on this page, so be sure to check it out, guys.
I will also release it on YouTube, but it's still going to be an audio clip. You're going to see this intro. You tormented souls. Now the guy that you see is the iconic, the god of death, called Grimna. He is much featured in our podcast. Now I also want to share with you a taste of what is going on in the podcast. And in the podcast I have a lot of songs in there. I have a lot of music in there. The music is mostly from Feslian Studios. I will put a link down below to his homepage. And some of the music actually are homemade. The intro and the outro of the podcast is made by my cousin Gundur Johansen, and I think you should check that out and listen to it. I think it's very cool, especially when you get to the outro. Let's check it out, guys. So when you hear that in the ending, it's gonna be like a cliffhanger. So you know when the music starts, okay, the ending is coming now, and I can't wait till next week. That's the feeling that I really want to get there. And I cannot mention the music without mentioning all the amazing sound effects used in the podcast, and it is brought to you by BattleBards.com. I also have a link down below. If you want sound effects like we use in the podcast, you can take our link and let them know that Nordic D&D sent you. And in that way you can actually support the channel. And I want to give you a taste what BattleBards puts to the table for Nordic D&D. Check it out, guys. Sound effects. Now our podcast is going to be filled with sound effects like this all the way through, and some of the sound effects also come from ProSound. I don't have an affiliate link to them, but you can check out their homepage at prosound.com. And also a lot of the sound effects actually are homebrewed by myself. Sometimes you just can't exactly find the sound effects that you need, and then you just have to improvise and create them yourself. Another cool aspect that I think is very amazing in this show is that we use voice actors. I know this may be a little strange, considering it is a D&D game, because I am the DM and I speak for all the enemies and the NPCs, and the player speaks for themselves, but that is in-game. I have actually afterwards reached out to some voice actors where I have written them dialogue down of NPCs, for example, of cutscenes and of some of the enemies, which I have got voice actors to re-record for me and then put it in instead of my voice. This also gives you a little bit of this audiobook feeling, because I think sometimes listening to Dungeons & Dragons podcast, it can be a little bit boring in length. I have chosen to cut down all the scenery as much as possible so it doesn't get too boring, too dry. So when there's a lot of dialogue that I feel is not related to the show or related to the story, I cut out. Sometimes when we're goofing around, sometimes we wait too long to make a decision, sometimes we wait too long to roll, sometimes we don't know what to do, sometimes we have maybe some discussions about some things. A lot of those things I've cut out to make it more on point with the game, with the story, and without taking anything of relevance out, of course. And of course, sometimes I add some of the discussions we have on the rules and some funny things that happen. I think it's always cool to have a little laugh while we play a game. It is a fun game to play. But on that note, I want to tell you that it is going to be an R-rated show, which gives me room to make it more gory, because it is an undead kind of theme, and it's also a political game, which you will hear when you listen to the podcast. And it just gives me more room, and of course I try my best not to be offensive in any way. It's not like we go cussing all the time. I want to keep it clean in that aspect, but people get butchered, murdered, there's death and stuff like that. It's some horror aspect in it as well, and it can get very graphic, so it will be an R-rated podcast. And I actually want to show this cutscene also, which you see in one of the pre-released episodes. It is the god of war and fire and destruction called Ignitus. He has a discussion with one of his minions, a dragonborn called Vermon. And in this clip you can hear the voice acting, you can hear the sound effects from BattleBards.com, and you can get a feeling on how a cutscene will sound. So check it out, guys. Ignitus found out what Vermon had done, and he took an anthropomorphic form and found Vermon. He grabbed him by the neck and upper body so tightly you can hear the cracking of his scales. And he said to him,
"You have betrayed me. You have prayed to another god and made a dragon of your own. Do you think what you have done will have any impact on Vernaruk whatsoever? It will be a drop of sweat trying to stop a volcano of molten lava. You have done nothing with this blasphemy but condemn your own soul to the fires of my domain. And you will spend an eternity in torture, Vermon.
So be it.
But I will honor the pact I made in your name for the other Dragonborns under you. I should have slaughtered you all, but I will show them mercy for I am still their god, and they are my first creations. But as for you, betrayer,
And the wrath of Ignitus was so severe that it burned 100 feet of ground to a crisp. Poor Vermon. Where did this happen, grandfather? The land is called Judgment Grounds. It is found in Sooth Island. The fire burned so severely that the entire ground has turned into hard stone. It is said that you can even see the skeleton remains of Vermont there, among the stones, lying like an eternal reminder to never cross the gods, especially Ignitus. I think it works well. I think it's kind of cool. You will, of course, when you follow the podcast, learn who the NPCs are, learn who the players are, so you can discern who the characters are and who speaks for who. If you ask me, I think it sounds amazing. I think it sounds very cool. I take the role-playing that they do and I amp it up with effects, and I amp it up with side scenes to make the story just more cool, if you ask me. Now, one thing that I want to share you and tell you up front that may be a little bit confusing with the podcast is the beginning of episode 1, because I have in my podcast a total of 3 flashbacks. Now, the flashbacks are because we started playing the Ariana game before we even decided it to be a podcast, so it was before we even recorded anything. And a lot of things happened at that time, which I think is very relevant to the story, which I think was very cool. And I really wanted to add that and share that with you. So I've made some flashbacks where I have written down exactly what happened in those games. And I've got some voice actors and my brother and myself and the players to narrate the flashbacks. And when you come to that, it will sound a lot like just an audiobook. But as soon as the flashbacks end, the live game start, and there are dice rolls, there are decisions made, where it feels more like a Dungeons and Dragons game. But there is a big gap between all the flashbacks. So yeah, you have a flashback. I think in the pre-release season you can hear the flashback in episode 1 and 2, and already when you come to episode 3, the live game starts. So yeah, like I said, it's going to be released in January in 2021, and I'm really excited about it, guys. I hope it's going to be as awesome as I want it to be. Now, of course, there are some places in the podcast where I maybe feel the recording is not as crisp as I wanted, because in the beginning I didn't have as good a microphone as I do now, and it was a bit of a learning experience as well, where to place the microphone, how to add the sound effects. Editing a sound file is very new to me, so I picked a lot of this up on the way. I think personally that you can hear as we go into the podcast, it gets better and better and better. And I think that is actually with a lot of the other famous podcasts as well. I mean, you can see the first couple of episodes of campaign number 1 on Critical Role, for example.
The audio's not so good.
There is actually a way for you to support the channel and to hear the episode already in December of 2020, and that is if you become a Patreon. If you support the channel, probably just $1 a month. In Denmark, it's 8 kroner, 8 kroner eller 7 kroner eller sådan noget. And if you support us that way, you can get an early release of the podcast already in December, and it will be released 1 month before every episode. So the episodes that are supposed to come in February already are released to the Patreons. And the episodes are going to be released every Friday. Now, I don't know which platform you are most comfortable with. Is it YouTube, or is it an audio experience on Stitcher or on Spotify, iTunes, Podbean? But be sure to subscribe on whichever platform you prefer and give us a review. It will mean a lot to us out here. It will help the show to get more out there. I'm really excited. We officially released the podcast. I put a lot of work in it. I put a lot of hours in it. And I think it's really fun. I mean, it's Dungeons and Dragons. It's always fun to have Dungeons and Dragons. We are still recording. The season is not done. We're not finished. And so I will keep you informed if things change along the way. But my plan is, and I think it will be no problem to release every episode once a week on Friday. I am a crafting DM. I also craft a lot of the terrain that I use in the games now. I'm sorry, you will not get to enjoy that in the podcast, but you can see that on this show, the Nerd Hangout, where I craft some of the things, and maybe when I actually show the players so you can see a reaction and just see how I set it up in the scenery and stuff like that. But that is on the Nerd Hangout. So yeah, guys, I don't know what you think. I hope the podcast is going to be something different. I hope it's going to be well received. I'm very excited about it. Time is ticking. It's coming out soon. And it has been recorded here in Copenhagen, Denmark. We are 3 Faroese players. Me, John Otnason, the DM, and my brother Kjartan Hansen. And Torur Ström is playing. And then we have 2 players who are Danish. We have Martin Rajen and we have Bastian Mørgenberg. These are all the players which are from the beginning. And then later on you're going to meet Lasse Sandal Kilrich and Marius Fletch. Anyway, guys, this was just a clip to show you a little bit about what to expect from the Ariana Saga, our podcast, to let you know some of the differences, to let you know, so you know a little bit what I have to offer you with the podcast. It's a 5th edition Dungeons & Dragons game. It is homebrew world and magic items and enemies. I really like to make my own twist on the game as well, although I follow most of the rules from raw rules of the 5th edition. There are some tweaks and twerks, as there always is most of the times with Dungeon Masters. That is all I have for this episode of the Nerd Hangout, guys. I really hope that you are going to follow us on the podcast as well. If you like Dungeons & Dragons, if you like to put that earplugs in and just listen when you clean or when you work or whatever you do when you go for a run, be sure to check out Nordic DnD, the Ariana Saga, and get a great story while you do all these things, guys. Be sure to follow us, be sure to like if you like our material, subscribe if you don't want to miss anything of the Nerd Hangout or the Ariana Saga, guys. Thank you for today, and goodbye, nerds. But I have everything that how the podcast and I want to show you the intro. I have a lot of songs. John.
Sovan, nothing but a boy, woke up in the middle of the night with a strong urge.
Sovan.